Congratulations, you have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lambcast. This is episode 748, and I'm your host, Richard Kirkham from Kirkham A Movie A Day. This week, we have no fake quotes, outrageous allegations of on-set behavior, or sexual harassment. We just have 5 people in search of meaning in the latest and probably last film from legendary director Francis Ford Coppola, Megalopolis. The film has been an on-again, off-again project for Coppola for decades. He's finally produced it, and we could judge for ourselves whether it's a dream project or a nightmare or something in between. Much like the production of the movie, the creation of this podcast episode has been affected by starts and stops. We had potential guests on standby, book guests dropped out, fresh guests come to the rescue, and a sense of excitement around all of it. Let me introduce you to the Lambs who braved cinemas and managed their schedules enough so that they could join us today. First up, I never had any doubt about his wanting to be on the show or his commitment to seeing this movie, the ever-reliable Howard Casner from Pop Art. Thanks for joining us, Howard.
What do you think about my boner?
I'm trying not to. Really trying not to. Next, I was sure he would see the movie, but I'm never sure if he's ever going to be free enough to catch up with us because he's a busy guy. But he did find time to join us, Aaron Neuwirth from Out Now with Aaron and Abe.
Hey, don't let the now destroy the forever.
First to answer the call when guests dropped out and I needed reinforcements, longtime Lamb Daniel Lackey joins us.
I sold some of my stash of Coppola wine to see Megalopolis this weekend at the last minute.
And finally, whenever I need a backup, he seems there to provide it. James Wilson of Blogging by Cinemalite.
Oh, I said, what the hell?
Okay, well, you're here with us now. What the hell? Let's get started. Megalopolis seems to be a polarizing film with a good many critics. It also seems to have some champions that defend the art of Francis Coppola. Let's find out which side of the fence everyone here is located on and whether anyone is straddling the fence. Let's start with our general thoughts, and Aaron, I'm going to start with you. What did you think of Megalopolis?
Oh, boy. Well, I feel like I'm already going to be alone. Because I found it to be mostly pretty great. I can acknowledge that it has its share of issues because any passion project that costs an exorbitant amount of money is bound to, run into some problems, especially ones that have been as long gestating as this one. But as far as what's being attempted goes and how much I felt engaged by it, entertained by it, and enjoyed looking for meaning in it, I was satisfied to high extents. We'll talk more about the various things about the acting or what have you, but what I like a lot is how fascinated I was by all of it. The notion of Coppola saying, I want to depict Rome in modern America. I didn't realize how literal that was going to be. Having studied ancient Rome in college for a good year, I was like, oh, okay, so they're taking just word for word ideas and things and plots and what have you and just saying that's what this is now. That kind of stuff, that got my attention more than I was expecting. And on top of that, you have just a lot of wild ideas for how to present something from an 85-year-old director, and what he feels this kind of future world would look like, or what interpretations he could have that he could bring to the table. I think as a movie that costs this much, I think it looks really great. I was, again, just taken away by the effort put into the production design, the art design, costumes, or what have you. There's a lot of garishness going on in costumes. There's a lot of weirdness going on in not only the actual megalopolis we see, but just in general, what's taking place. There's a few performances I think that are standout that we could talk about later. But overall, no, I was I wouldn't say I was like surprised by how much I liked it necessarily. I thought it could go either way, and I'd probably react either way. But in terms of what I took away from it, was like, no, I was quite into this in a way where I look forward to seeing it again to see what else is going on in this thing.
Well, you have outed yourself as our resident Roman history expert for this show, so thank you. We'll be going to you on a regular basis. I didn't reread my Marcus Aurelius before going to the movie, so I'm not sure that I'm quite up to date on all of those kinds of things. And when in doubt, you're going to be my default consultant.
Yeah, we'll see how good I am at that, but okay.
Howard, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's pretty awful. The pluses are the performances by the male actors. Adam Driver is exceptionally good in one way, and I think England should get him over there to do Hamlet. I mean, every year they do a Hamlet with some pop culture star, so he delivers to be or not to be really, really well. The female characters are really badly drawn and badly acted. The script is, I think, pretty bad and pretty clunky. It looks great, especially the costuming, trying to make modern day versions of Roman clothing. But, and I don't think it's about what people think it's about. But we can go into that later. But I think overall it is just a really, 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 really terrible movie.
Well, I think it's about 2 hours and 20 minutes, so I've got that part right.
Yeah.
Daniel, how about you? You came to our rescue, checking in on this at the last minute, so what did you think? Were you glad you did so?
Yes, because I was planning to see this movie, but when you put out the call, when you put out the bat signal, I thought, well, okay, I've got some time this weekend. Let's carve out some time to see this, because this is going to be what this is. I think ultimately this film is interesting. I think in to me, I find it most interesting as a cultural artifact. This is really potentially the last time a filmmaker of Coppola's generation is going to get this kind of money to make a film that is so flagrantly and flamboyantly uncommercial. We're not gonna see a movie like this again from someone, from a filmmaker born in the 30s or 40s. Pros, lot of ideas in this film. A lot of acting. There's a lot of acting. Everybody does a lot of acting in this film, except for the people that don't do a lot of acting, which is a typical problem whenever Coppola is in this mode. It's the same problem he had with Bram Stoker's Dracula. But a lot of acting, a lot of ideas. Looks wonderful. Cons, no frickin' story. This is a kind of like a blob of themes and ideas, and nothing really resembling like a coherent plot. And I think ultimately, plus you add the really almost self-consciously, pretentiously Shakespearean dialogue, which I tend to feel even trips up some of the veterans on if you're tripping up like Jason Schwartzman, then what hope does Natalie Emanuel have, of navigating some of this stuff? And it's a big, it's one of those things where as a passion project, I'm glad Coppola got to make this movie, and if we're going to be spending $130 million on films, let it be films like this. I honestly can't get excited about throwing this kind of money at yet another franchise film, that is indistinguishable from every other franchise film out there. But ultimately, this is a film that I respected more than I actually liked.
James, did you have some respect or some liking for the film?
Well, I went to see this in the first showing that was available to me because I know Megalopolis has been his dream project. And there's always a danger with dream projects in that, everybody, most of the dream projects I've seen have been disappointing. Because the creator is in love with the idea, but somehow the initial spark that created that idea doesn't translate onto the screen and isn't communicated to the audience. And I kind of found that here. He'd been working on it since Apocalypse Now, as far as the script, and you would think that with so much work on it and so much attention to it throughout the years, that it would be a little less threadbare than it actually is. It is visually stunning at times, and there are moments that are actually amazing, just in how they configured shots and realized some things. Ever so often there was something that would absolutely stun me and go, oh, well, yeah, he still got it. But the through line of the movie doesn't get communicated. It's a movie of great ambition, but it's like the director was too familiar with his own material, that he either didn't stay in love with it to communicate it, or wanted to have his actors ad lib the whole thing in order to keep it fresh in his mind. And somewhere along the way, the great ideas and the ability to communicate that got lost. There's still great moments in it. There's still great ideas. But I think at some point the message, the simple storytelling to the audience got lost. So I call it a tentative failure. Whenever I'm disappointed by a movie that I'm really anticipating, I kind of hesitate, because sometimes as I'm walking down the street, I realize, oh, now I get it. But I don't know whether this will have that same power of being able to communicate it itself finally. I think there was a disconnect somewhere between director and the people that were playing out his screenplay.
All right. That's, you know what? I think we've got a wide variety of opinions here. I'm going to be kind of a fence sitter on Strangely, because I literally had two diametrically opposed opinions to this movie. It went back and forth. I was so excited about seeing the movie ahead of time. When it was announced, when it was playing at Cannes, even though it got mixed reviews, I was still very interested in seeing it, looking forward to it. I made sure to schedule an IMAX screening for it, because I thought I want to see it in the best possible circumstances. And as I'm watching it for the first hour, I hated it. I was pissed. I was loathing it. I thought, oh, he has just blown all of that money for nothing, and it's just a mess. It's just irritating what's going on here. This is incoherent. How can anybody figure out what the point is in any of this? And then about halfway through, there's a little bit of story that kicks in. and I start thinking, okay, well, I can kind of see where this is going and how this is, there is a narrative here. It's just taken us a long time to get there, and there's still a lot of weird stuff going on, but at least I can see that we have an endpoint. And the longer it went on, the more I was able to tolerate it, and by the end I was interested in what was happening, and I always appreciated the way it looked, but I was a hell of a lot less pissed off about the incoherence of it by the time we got to the end, because it made a little bit more sense. And so I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking, is this a film I could recommend to people? No. Is it a film that I might see again? Yes. And it's one of those movies that I think the more I see it, I'll probably appreciate it more and be less irritated by it. Or I'll go the exact opposite direction and say, what the hell was I thinking? This was a complete mess, and I shouldn't have apologized for it at all. I am really uncertain about how I feel about this film, except that I was glad that I saw it, and I anticipate that I will see it again at some point.
Can I say something to that exact point you just made?
Sure.
If you're telling me, would you recommend it to people, and you're saying no, but you're also adding, I found it incredibly fascinating and I want to see it again, why wouldn't you want other people to have that same experience?
Because I think my experience is probably unique.
You don't know that, though. You just heard four other people tell you wildly different things about what they felt about the movie.
And it's just a question of when I encounter other people, they say, should I see this movie? I look at that person and I think, is there any chance that this person is going to have the same kind of reaction that I'm going to have? And I'm going to say, probably not, 90% of the time. But now there are exceptions.
But your reaction is like, I like it both. I don't like it and I like it, and you want to say someone else shouldn't feel that way.
No, I'm not saying they shouldn't feel that way. I'm saying I wouldn't want to make.
You're just denying them the opportunity to begin with.
Oh, of course I'm not denying them the opportunity.
You said don't see it.
No, I didn't say. Would I recommend it? I said no. That's not saying don't see it. It's saying I don't recommend it. I wouldn't tell people. No. I have not said this is a terrible movie and you shouldn't see it.
I didn't say you said that.
Well, that seems to be what's being implied.
If you're saying you don't recommend it to people, that's telling someone don't go see this. That's how I interpret that.
I think that's not the accurate interpretation. Go ahead,
Daniel. It's a film I feel with a very, very specific audience. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday after I saw this, and she was like, "Oh, I want to see this movie," and I'm like, okay, well, on the one hand, I know you like Adam Driver a lot, and you like Giancarlo Esposito a lot, so you may get a lot out of this film because, of their performances. And on the other hand, you are also a person who likes narratives. You like nice, tight narratives, and you don't have a lot of patience for just a lot of let's throw a lot of stuff on the screen that's pretty and stuff, and you can't really make sense of it. You like narrative coherence. You like coherence. I just, maybe you like it, maybe you don't. I'm not going to tell you not to see it, but if you do see it, don't come back to me and yell at me that I didn't warn you.
The example I'll use is that I think Bresson and Godard are two of the greatest filmmakers that ever lived. Would I recommend them to my friends? Generally, I say no, because I don't think there's a chance in hell that they're going to like you. I'm not saying don't see them. I'm just saying, as you said, remember, I warned you if you don't like them.
That's
adding
an additional.
The kind of film you're going to like.
And
but
by the way,
that's adding a context that I can respect, because yes, if you know who you're talking to, obviously you can have a sense of what you're trying to recommend to begin with. If you're just blankly, being asked, should I go see this, and you wouldn't recommend, I feel like there's a difference there. I mean, if you have a context for who you're talking to, I get it. And I agree. It's absolutely uncommercial. I have no disagreement there whatsoever. It's a movie that's not going to work for a majority of the audiences. Clearly. I get that. I just think if there's someone that's interested for XYZ reason, I wouldn't say offhandedly no.
Yeah, if they were interested for XYZ reason, I would talk about what their reasons are and whether or not I thought those would justify them seeing it. But in the context of, when I'm making a suggestion to people, this would not be at the top of my list of things to suggest to people. I took my daughter, and she's sitting next to me watching the movie, and she's not saying anything, but I could tell every minute that she loathed this movie. And she was very patient with me at the end. And as we're walking out, I said, "So, what'd you think?" And she said, "I hated it." And I said, "Yeah, I knew that. I could tell. I'm sorry."
Yeah, you know your daughter.
Yeah,
I mean,
I do.
Like, you know
I
her.
do. And I know a lot of the people that I interact with, and I could say to them, "This is not going to be something that you would care for. Would I recommend it to you? No." But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't suggest that other people who are, like you said, have a particular interest in it, you know, whether if you're a fan of Adam Driver, or you think Giancarlo Esposito is, fantastic, or you just, you think that Shia LaBeouf has been so neglected over the years, and you hate what's happened to his career, and you really want to see him, make a comeback. Oh, is this the film? You know what? There are things about this that maybe I could recommend to you, but like you said, somebody said anyway, I think you need a context.
It's for like Adam Driver fans. It's like, I want to see this because Adam Driver's in it. Okay, well, are you interested in the Adam Driver of like BlacKkKlansman, or are you interested in the Adam Driver of Annette? Because this is the Adam Driver of Annette that you're getting here.
Well, he's more likable.
And really, you're also getting the Adam Driver. Adam Driver also puts in similar performances to the ones he did on his first SNL appearance.
I'm with Daniel as far as, if a movie like this exists among other movies that are out right now, basically, what's actually happening, and you have an auteur that's put all of his own money into something ginormous like this, whether or not I like it, I depending on who I'm talking to, I would by default be like, I would want to be curious about this. I want to be more curious about, art than seeing something that's artless in the realm of movies that like this that don't come along very often. I'd absolutely be like, yeah, of course I would recommend seeing this. If I know who I'm talking to and know what I'm getting them into, obviously I'd have to reconsider like what I would exactly say or whatnot. But I'd want to like try to keep the random person open-minded about what they're going into.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to ask a question.
I was
saying something.
It also depends on to what extent, with a lot of people I've noticed, I'm on one Discord group with a bunch of film nerds, and they're all like, yeah, Megalopolis. And then on another Discord server I'm on, I have one friend who he says this is his least anticipated movie of the year. He's also the sort of person who tends to say things like people who don't like Deadpool and Wolverine have no capacity for joy in their lives. I mean, that sort of person, that sort of person is not the target audience for Megalopolis. It's a self-consciously arty film in a period where you don't spend this kind of money on arty films. You spend this kind of money on the latest franchise entry. And that I find fascinating, but I understand why a lot of people don't find it fascinating, or in fact even realize that this is out there. For a lot of people, Coppola really hasn't done a whole lot that's been massively in the public eye for a long time.
He hasn't had a hit since the 90s. No question.
Right.
Well, I think you're hitting on something interesting here when I said that I don't think Megalopolis is what people think it's about. I don't think it's a critique of the U.S. now politically. I think it's about Francis Ford Coppola and his desire to make art films that he thinks will live far longer and be more important in the long run than movie franchises. And so Driver is a stand-in for Coppola. It's not about politics, except that it's about the politics of art. And there are a couple of issues I have with that. One, he can't conceive the possibility that we need both kinds of films. We need the pop culture films to bring in money. We need the art films to bring in innovation and to take movies into the future, because pop culture films will eventually stagnate without that. But in the film, one of the most interesting lines I thought was when he says, Megalopolis, I want everybody to be 5 minutes from a hospital and 5 minutes from a theater. And I thought, well, how nice of him to give hospitals top billing. But I think that showed exactly where his feelings land. In Megalopolis, we have a false dilemma. You either choose the casino or you choose Megalopolis. And there's no reason why you can't have both. The problem with Megalopolis is that as a thing, it's really very vague. And at the very end, when you see Megalopolis, it's not at all what he said it was going to be. There's no place for people to live in Megalopolis. It's just an aesthetically astounding Central Park. It's of no practical use except aesthetically. Now, I think it's incredibly beautiful, and I would love to have Megalopolis exist for that reason alone. The problem is that if I had a choice between the movie Megalopolis and a franchise film, I would take the franchise film because Megalopolis, the movie, is terrible. In the movie, Megalopolis is very beautiful, but it's like a Frank Lloyd Wright building. It's beautiful, but Wright was no engineer, and his buildings are incredibly impractical. And that's sort of how Megalopolis is in the movie, that it serves no purpose. Even though he claims it was going to, when you see it, it serves absolutely no purpose except to be aesthetically beautiful.
I'd argue the city of Megalopolis is presented somewhat ambiguously on purpose, because you can't just show utopia and be like, there it is. That said, you do get like a fly-through that has people living in their little bubbles and stuff like that. I mean, the movie ends a little too short for you to like really experience this thing that is Megalopolis, and I think that's somewhat by design. That said, I mean, your theory here, as far as you think the movie's about this versus what basically Coppola has said it's about, and then you also find fault in the reason that you've come up with the movie being about. I mean, sure, okay, I guess. I mean, if you don't buy into what you believe the movie to be about, that's fair. I do think that I do think it has plenty to say about like what it means to America, and a number of, they could be a lot of different things at the same time. I don't think it's trying to make itself limited to specifically one thing of what it's trying to say about America or franchise films or art house films or art.
I think that a lot of, I'm not going to say that I don't think that Francis Ford Coppola didn't intend for this film to have a political message, but I also feel that a lot of stuff that is specifically seems to comment on like the current situation in the United States today, I think a lot of that might be almost accidental. Certainly some of the comments that, John Voight has made, about not realizing, with Coppola saying on the one hand that this is a critique of Trumpism, and on the other hand, John Voight, who is very much, in his personal life a Trump supporter, and also if I didn't know he was a Trump supporter, I would have thought in this film that his performance was a deliberate parody of Trump. But it's one of those things where I think there is some stuff in there that's maybe a little bit accidental. I think the main theme, of the film, comparing the United States to the Roman Empire, I think that is as much an artifact of him conceiving this in the 70s as it is, something that's right now. And going into the 70s and going, from the 70s to the 80s period, where the idea of, the artist versus commercialism, I think that that's a universal theme. I don't actually think that in terms of the thematics and the allegory of the film, I don't think that there's a whole lot in this film that specifically refers to what things are, in the middle of this third decade of the 21st century.
I'd agree. I think he's very deliberately not going hard on things in the way he could. And I think that speaks to the optimism that he's trying to show, especially by the end, which is hopeful and I don't think all the way earned, but certainly expresses his desire to see a bright future as opposed to leading us down a darker path, despite the movie having elements that could suggest that that's exactly where things are headed. And whether or not he believes that himself, he's certainly trying to make the most optimistic portrayal possible of what could take shape here, which I think is a detriment in a way, because yes, like you're saying, and even what Howard, you're saying, I mean, there's a way to be more direct in all he said, or at least hammer down harder on themes in a film that's already not that subtle. And yet it does seem like he's holding things at a bit of an arm's length, whether that's because of the many rewrites he's done to shape this thing based on the many experiences that have happened over the 5 decades he's been writing this, or because he simply didn't want to make another dark film in a career where he's had many dark films. He wanted to make one that was more light, despite still being R-rated, I guess. I mean, I can't speak exactly to what his thought process was there, but yes, I do think it's trying to be more timeless than might be necessary for a film like this.
Well, it's presented as a fable, so I think we're supposed to see it as kind of this, metaphor, but with the happy ending. And at one point there is a promotional line I think comes from the film. I'm trying to remember exactly. It may in fact be the prologue, where all empires fall. Well, if all empires fall, then why is Megalopolis going to be? Is it going to be a new empire, or is it going to sustain the existing empire? That seems to be a little bit of a contradiction with the position that has been taken. That something it needs to, does it need to die out before it can be revived? I'm not sure.
That's being human.
Yeah, well, I think
as far as assuming you can be the one that creates this all-powerful thing, utopia, and be like, this will be fine. No worries from here. I solved it, me myself. That's being.
But then we'd have to rephrase we'd have to change the name of the movie to Megamaniacal.
But I also don't think Coppola's really interested in presenting answers to anything. I think he wants, what he's trying to do here is to try to bombard the audience with a bunch of parallels and allegory. That this is not something that draws a parallel between the Roman Empire and the United States as a hyperpower, using story and metaphor stuff. It's something that just basically throws a lot of images and themes at you and doesn't really tell you necessarily what they mean or what you're supposed to take away from them. And I kind of assume that's deliberate on Coppola's part, other than the fact that he kind of wants you to have hope for the future, and he wants you to consider aesthetics as important as practicality. But I don't think his point is to provide answers here. I think he's posing a lot of questions. I think he's trying to make people think, but he's not. I don't think he's really holding anybody's hand or trying to.
James, you had a question a while back, and we kind of skipped over you. What were you trying to say?
I think we've moved beyond that question, but I'm just kind of sitting back and listening to this conversation in fascination, because we're all arguing different points, but we're all right. It's really interesting listening to it. I do have a question, that is, did anybody see the version where there is the Q&A with Caesar Catalina?
Yeah, with the person in the audience?
Yeah, I didn't see that.
I don't think so.
No.
I did, but I'm curious if anyone else did.
No.
Howard, did you?
That was my question.
I don't remember a scene like that, but
you don't remember someone in the
movie,
theater?
I don't remember exactly.
I mean, the theater, the lights come on and somebody in the theater stands up and asks the screen a question. So it's pretty memorable if that happens.
I thought that was only supposed to be in the IMAX version.
I saw the IMAX version, so.
I thought I saw the IMAX version.
I saw it on the Monday that it came out. I know it's like a limited thing, so I don't know like what the how to know exactly if your screening is going to have it. I saw it at the Monday, advanced fan screening or whatever it was. So I think all of those
I'm sure
All
that
of
that's
those
where
ones
it
have
was
stuff.
scheduled for, because you can't plant somebody in the audience in every theater to do that for
No.
every showing. That's not going to
No,
work.
that's where 20 million went to do that. And when you buy the Blu-ray, somebody comes into your house and asks a question.
Can I get
Yeah.
that job? Because I'd like to show up at
And-
people's houses and
Adam
ask
Driver is
questions.
sitting at his home waiting to answer your questions. Yeah, because I remember somebody said a line about Megalopolis being as close to hospitals, and I went, I don't remember that line. Was that in
It's
Q&A?
no, it was. It's a blink or you'll miss it line. Adam Driver is telling his designers that he doesn't want anybody to be farther away than 5 minutes from a hospital or a theater. And for some reason, the line just jumped out for me. But I
Yeah.
think for a lot of people, it was so thrown away, you could have easily missed it.
Yeah.
It does seem like something Caesar Catalina would say. I mean, that seems pretty in character for him.
It's in character, but in terms of like, I remember the line, but it's not like a particular line that like. There's a lot of dialogue here that just the point is to call attention to itself, and it's Francis Ford Coppola saying, "Oh, look, I can write these complex sentences," and it tends to get lost under things like don't let the now destroy forever, or is the society where we're living is the only one that's available to us, or what do you think about my boner?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me try and impose a little bit of structure on our discussion here. Let's start with the two things. What's the best quality of the film and what's the worst quality of the film? Because I think everybody can have an answer to that one. And Go ahead, Daniel.
The best quality of the film is it's very pretty. The worst quality of the film is that there's nobody there to tell Francis. You might want to ask Shia to dial it back a little there, man.
I think he did.
That's the problem. The problem is this is Coppola writ large, and he's doing what he wants, and there's nobody there to maybe say, "Are you sure this is a good idea, Frank?"
Can I ask a question about that to all of you?
Sure.
Have you enjoyed Coppola's non-4 films, and I think 5 because I love the Rain People and that's 60s, but have you enjoyed Coppola's other like experimental efforts? His Tetros, his Youth Without Youth, his Rumblefish. Are you into like his I'm gonna do something that no one else is doing movies?
I walked out of Youth Without Youth, and Tetra or whatever it is was okay, but I didn't really connect with. I haven't liked, for me, a Coppola film since Godfather 2, with perhaps the exception of Peggy Sue Got Married, which is a wonderful film but totally unworthy of Coppola's talents. So, yeah, I'm sort of on an outlier when it comes to Coppola.
I
Who had this talent that was unfulfilled. Sorry, go ahead.
I haven't liked a Coppola film since Tucker. But admittedly, before Megalopolis, the last Coppola film I've seen might have been Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I can't finish that film. It is so over-designed. I can't. It gives me a headache.
I don't know if it gives me a headache, but I think it's a terrible movie as well. They had to keep cutting Keanu Reeves' lines because he was so bad.
Yeah.
And I think it's a film where I see a lot of parallels with Megalopolis because, like I said earlier, it is a film where every performance is someone is just barely able to recite the lines and make them sound like things anybody would say on the one hand, and on the other hand, the rest of the cast is just they might as well literally just be ripping chunks out of the scenery and just stuffing them into their gaping maws.
It's a Dracula movie.
Yes, there are gaping maws in the Dracula movie.
It's a Dracula movie, but there's like a Hammer Dracula movie, and then there's a Tom Waits plays Renfield Dracula movie.
Oh yeah, Renfield, a character that needs subtlety.
I'm not saying he needs subtlety, but it's like there's Dwight Fry as Dracula, and then there's Dwight Fry as Renfield, and then there's Tom Waits as Renfield. You know, when Gary Oldman is your baseline of regular naturalistic acting, you know things are going to be off the scale.
To answer the question that Aaron asked, frankly, I have not seen any of his films since The Rainmaker. That's the last film of his that I saw. Everything else either was too infrequently available or was presented, I will say that I was maybe influenced by comments that other people have made, that it was not necessarily something great, and so I didn't bother with it. I haven't gone, a lot of things become available after they've been in theaters that I haven't bothered to catch up with because I didn't hear a lot of enthusiasm for them in the first place. If there was something that somebody had said, this was, there's sliced bread and then there's this, and it got neglected, I would probably have bothered to check it out. But all of those films that have come in the last 20 years, I have no idea how they stack up. So, to be honest with you, that's my answer to that.
So when
I will not stand for this Jack erasure.
He is the rare filmmaker that has.
It took somebody a while to get it, but they got it.
He is one of the rare filmmakers where he has some of the best films I think ever made, along with one of the worst films I've ever seen, which is Jack. I mean, so it's impressive to say the least that he can have that sort of range. I will say I did my due diligence when he first announced that he was finally going to make this movie and be like, all right, I should probably see the unseen Coppola films that have gone by me. So like I did like The Rain People, again, that's earlier, but I love The Rain People. I was surprised by how much I loved it. I saw the Cotton Club, the version where Robert Evans doesn't cut out all the black people, which I thought was also pretty solid. I've seen Tucker before. I think Tucker's fine. Rumblefish and Outsiders, Rumblefish is more experimental than the Outsiders, but they're like interesting. And I saw Tetro when it came out, and I was actually quite impressed by it. So it's like I've been, I wouldn't say all over the place, but I certainly admire him as one who certainly puts his effort into stuff. He tries. He wants to do things not by the norm by any means. I wouldn't call him necessarily a maverick because I think it's just dumb to call people a maverick. But I do. When I'm walking into Megalopolis, I'm geared to expect that I'm not going to get a traditional film by any means. I'm not saying you guys aren't, but in terms of what Coppola is like out to do, I can respect that he's like not just in his own head, but like he feels like daring is the right answer to questions of what he wants to do. He's not sitting there being like, I've had shots in my head for years that I want to accomplish. It's more, I'm going to find this as I do it. Is that the best way to make any movie? Is that the best way for anyone to make a movie? Who's to say? But in terms of what he's coming out with here, I'm happy to respect that he's making these kinds of choices that feel unlike things that I've seen and can't get anywhere else. Again, that's not me saying this was perfect by any means.
Well, some of those things that you can't see anywhere else, you can see somewhere else if you go to a Cirque du Soleil show.
And if you're a fan of Neil Breen.
Neil Breen's incompetent, though. There's a difference there. You can say you don't like this movie, but there's not a level of incompetence going on display here. Like he's making the choice he absolutely wants to make.
I do feel to an extent that this is the sort of movie Neil Breen would make if Neil Breen was competent.
I think Neil Breen would love seeing this. He'd feel like he'd say that I could do this.
I can imagine Neil Breen basically seeing this film and saying, "This guy's doing what I'm doing so much better than I'm." It's like Devo's reaction to Dare to Be.
All right. Well, James, how about you? You got a best and worst quality of the film?
Best is, of course, visual. It looks wonderful. The worst quality of it is a lack of solidity. It's so vague as to be frustrating. And there are other filmmakers who can pull off vague, but Francis Ford Coppola isn't one of those.
All right, Howard, did we give you a chance to chime in on these issues?
No, actually, but that's okay. For me, the strongest are the male performances, especially Adam Driver, Giancarlo Esposito, and I think Shia LaBeouf is very good in this. The only problem I have with Adam Driver's performance is that, as good as he is, I don't think he is a character that could get women to fawn over him like they do in this film. The worst part is, I think I agree, there's no story. And he loses control of the narrative, which I think he's sometimes done in other films.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it could be that he's been working on it so long he's completely lost any objectivity over it, and that it's a film that might have perhaps worked better in the 1970s or 80s when the conflicts in the film feel more relevant to then. I'm not sure they quite feel as relevant today. For me, the politics are a bit different, and there are a lot of differences between the Roman Empire and the USA today that they don't talk about in the movie. They sort of hedge on. For example, there's no slavery in this movie, but Rome was heavily had an economic system was based on slavery, which is one of the reasons why the South finally, that sort of thing. But I think there's just no story, and he lost control of the narrative.
All right, and you guys, you were talking earlier. I just didn't want to cut you off if you had something else to say about the best and worst qualities of the film. Aaron and Daniel.
No.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not. Aaron can say all he wants. I for myself, that's all I had to say about it.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of like best and worst, I don't know. I mean, there's, as one that just really likes the film, I could just be listing off things I like about it. I don't know what the best would necessarily be. I mean, the worst, I think, is that I don't feel the ending is earned as much in the final like minutes of the film as far as where we leave things off. I think it just kind of gets there, and I'm like, oh, all right, we're done. I feel like there's more that could have been fleshed out about whatever revelation is taking place as Caesar Catalina delivers like a big speech about like, hey, by the way, this thing I was building, it's done. And here's my baby, here's my grandparents.
Come look at it.
If you like airports, come to Megalopolis. There's a lot of moving walkways.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
And Catherine Hunter's like, I do love airports, and she's like all into it. Can I to speak to Howard's one? Can we talk about the acting a bit? We haven't really talked about the actors much beyond reference in Adam Driver.
Yeah, Howard seems to be in favor of the performances by the male stars or performers in the film, but is a little dismissive of the female performances. So you can take whatever position you want on any of them, of course.
As far as Driver goes, the fact that in real life he has a lot of pull with people as far as how much they like him for his looks, like I guess that speaks to what Caesar Catalina goes for him, because I think he's certainly a non-traditionally handsome actor, and yet people love him. He has an audience specifically for that reason. So it's like, okay, I get it. Or I guess whatever. Performance-wise, I agree that Driver is good here. I don't think he's at his best, and I think that comes from being, the load bearer of the cast. He has to do the most with the character that's not going to be inherently interesting as others, because that's what supporting actors generally get to bring, the kind of more quirky performances. As far as the male versus female actors, I mean, I could agree that like Natalie Emmanuel is, I don't want to say a cipher, but more of a means to an ends kind of character. She's kind of there to just operate based on what the plot requires of the moment. But I mean, I think Aubrey Plaza is the best thing in this film by far. I think she gets what movie she's in. She's the most fun to watch whenever she's around. And I think that's the one that I would spotlight if I'm going to look at the performance here. Meanwhile, LaBeef, he has a lot of hair, I guess. I mean, he's certainly. We can talk about the nature of like him and Voight and Dustin Hoffman to an extent being quote unquote problematic by today's standards, but Voight at least showed me, yeah, that's John Voight. He knows how to act. LaBeef, I don't think he doesn't know how to act, but I do think he's like his choices feel the most intrusive on the film, I guess is what I would say.
I felt in terms of the acting, I don't think that there. Number one, it's capital A acting. There's nothing in this film resembling. One of the things I said to a friend after I saw this film is there's a lot of acting in this film. You know, some of it's good, but it's bad. But everybody is putting in a lot of acting. There's nothing really resembling a naturalistic performance here, which is that's fine. That's a perfectly valid acting choice. Perfect, and I'm sure that's what Coppola wanted. But an interesting thing that I spotted, that seemed to occur to me early on, and when I was watching the film, is that nobody seems to be basing their performances. Nobody seems to be adjusting their performances on what other people are doing. People are just seem to be putting in whatever performances they want, or what Coppola is indicating he wants, regardless of what other people are doing. And it occurred to me that if you had told me that every actor in this film had their role filmed separately against a green screen, and all the stuff was added together in post, I'd say that makes sense. Like there's a throwaway scene, I don't know, maybe about a third of the way through the film, and they're throwaway characters. There's some sort of parade going on, and there are some cops talking. One cop walks off, and the head cop says to the rest of the cops, "Where did that cop go?" And the other cops go that way. And the head cop says, "Okay, then we're going in the opposite direction."
Yeah.
And it was almost like nobody was but it was almost like he was talking to everybody in that scene, delivered their lines like they were talking to themselves. It's really a weird sort of acting style. It's really Lanthimos. You see it a lot in Lanthimos' films, but I thought it was really interesting for a film like this to have that kind of acting.
Well, I think that's very perceptive. I felt that way several times. Those scenes with Adam Driver and Natalie Emmanuel early on, when she arrives in his office posing as a child, whatever, and they all know that it's an artifice. That whole sequence felt like an artifice. And when you said the performances could easily have been done individually and then glued together, that's exactly how I felt about that sequence. It was as if these two people were not connected in any way at all, except by what the script demanded of them, not by what was going on in the particular scene. And it surprised me that it ends up going the direction that it does a little bit, because later on it feels when they become romantically entangled, and when they finally commit to each other, and when we have progeny arriving at some point, that felt a little bit more realistic. But that opening scene, I'm going, that doesn't feel at all like the seeds of either a professional relationship, an antagonistic relationship, or a romantic relationship. It just felt odd. Well, does anybody else have anything to say about the acting performances? Any particulars that stood out for you? Anybody that you want to deride for their choices that they made, or are we ready to move on to something else?
I like that Giancarlo Esposito wasn't playing icy cold villain, because I've seen that a lot of him lately. He's still playing a foil or an antagonist of sorts to Caesar, but at least he has a bit more, I don't know, verve to him compared to, Steelface, which he's been doing a lot lately.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty good sequence when he's offering the bribe basically to Adam Driver's character, and he's talking about how much his daughter means to him, and I'm still a little unclear why it was so important to him that they not be connected in any way, shape, or form. But it did feel like you said, he's not doing the Iceman that he is so often known for, and I thought that felt like a much more realistic character at that point. Even the great manipulators and corrupt politicians are people too, and we've got something going on here that maybe we can relate to.
Did anybody relate to any of the characters in this movie? Did anybody understand their motivations besides, grand gestures?
Not really.
Yeah, I wouldn't
understand
say
their motivations. I mean, mostly it's power for a majority of these characters. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah, but that's that's a very broad thing.
It's broad, but I mean that's what it is. I mean, they're not deeply complex, most of them.
Yeah, there's just
it's kind of it is about power, but on the other hand, it's so baldly about power. There's no, there's absolutely no vulnerability in any of these characters at all. There's nothing that makes them human.
I'd argue that's what makes me like Aubrey Plaza's character, because I feel like for all the wow that Wow Platinum puts out there, the fact that she has this deep-seated love for Caesar, but can't get it back from him, I think that's what grounds her character. To have something there outside of just the kind of the bigger presentation she puts on when it comes to Voight or LaBeouf's characters. I mean that's I wouldn't say I necessarily relate to that, but at least I saw something there compared to the other characters that are driven fairly broadly by power, which again kind of reflect when you read about history, there's rarely a lot of nuance when it comes to why did this general do this or why did this dictator do that, and it's like, well, because they wanted power. I don't generally see like the layers within that lead to those decisions.
Yeah,
I felt the only way I would have known that Wow Platinum had an unrequited love for Caesar is because she said she had an unrequited love for Caesar. I don't see it anywhere in the writing of the character, and I don't see it anywhere in Plaza's performance. I don't see it. I don't see a deep love between Caesar and Julia, other than the fact that there's dialogue saying that they want to have a baby together. I think I got a little bit of pathos out of Cicero's going to Caesar and saying, yeah, my daughter's really important to me. I got a little bit of pathos off that, but not really. This is really a tell don't show movie.
Yeah.
I would disagree about Plaza, but there's not really much to say. I just disagree. I mean, the Julia Caesar thing, I agree, because I don't think they have much chemistry together. I mean, that's the problem.
They really don't.
I mean, obviously, the joy Catherine Hunter has from those moving walkways, though, that's pure. I can see that.
That's really the purest. That's honestly one of the very few scenes in the film where I actually felt any genuine emotion coming off the actors.
And that was the performance that struck me, was Catherine Hunter all the way through. The way she looks at Esposito when he's holding the baby is like, I can relate to that.
I think the moral here is find someone who looks at you the way Catherine Hunter looks at a moving walkway.
I mean, that wins Cicero over. He's like, fine, have the baby.
Have the baby and the moving walkway.
I just want to roam around Megalopolis on the walkways with my wife. Wear my hats.
Do you think the guys who created the Segway were the forerunners of Megalopolis? Because that's what they thought was going to change the urban center.
I'm sure in the community center of Megalopolis they have the a history wall, and it has the Segways, like one of the murals that they have on there. I did like seeing Lawrence Fishburne here, just because I'm like, oh, 15-year-old Larry Fishburne was with him back in Apocalypse Now, and now here he is the narrator with his voice and Caesar's driver.
Yeah.
Adam Driver's driver.
There are a ton of those callbacks from previous films that he's got in the film, so it's nice. Speaking of somebody we haven't mentioned at all, because his character seems so irrelevant and forgettable, we've got Dustin Hoffman in the movie as the fixer, and I'm not sure what he fixed, and he dies apparently, and nobody pays much attention to it. It's another one of those missed opportunities in the film to make it narratively more coherent. Instead, we just have this kind of stereotype character in the background that disappears for no reason whatsoever.
I'm glad it's Rosh Hashanah this week because and Yom Kippur soon after, because Dustin Hoffman playing overt Jew in movie is it's nice. He has something to repent for, I guess. Even Coppola, I guess, feels like, you know what, this character's not doing it for me, and he kills him off right away.
What I was particularly amused by is this weekend I saw not only Megalopolis but Apartment 7A, in which Diane Wiest delivers a stereotypical New York accent to rival what Dustin Hoffman does in Megalopolis.
All right.
This was the week for the stereotypical New York accent.
And I always tell people, you know what stereotyping is, right? That's when you can do it with both hands.
Hey-o.
All right.
Boom, boom, one in a row.
Thank you. Anything else that you guys wanted to talk about before we wrap up this part of the discussion?
Leave Vesta Sweetwater alone.
Yes. Anybody have any idea what Megalon does?
The same thing unobtainium does?
Oh, exactly.
Oh,
Well,
speaking of Megalon, there was one thing that is particularly spoilery that I wanted to mention that I thought was hilarious, which is the parallel to how Adam Driver's character looks when he's healing from being shot in the face by a kid. It matches Giancarlo Esposito's death on Breaking Bad.
All right.
what I was wondering about the Nobel Prize is what category he would have won in for that.
Yeah, is
couldn't
that
figure out
chemistry, physics?
I assume physics or chemistry. I mean, chemistry,
I
especially if
guess
he's developed.
it just doesn't seem like
I prefer to think that this takes place in an alternate universe where there's only one Nobel Prize and they deliver it in the category of science with a capital S. And
that would make sense.
And an exclamation point at the end.
Yeah.
I will, as opposed to unobtainium, an actual scientific term that existed before Avatar, just to make that clear, where it's just a commodity in that universe. Megalon, I mean, it's like this bio adaptive material that helps him design or like structure Megalopolis that happens to have the side effect of Adam Driver can stop time. One of those classic side effects.
The stopping time probably would get him a second Nobel Prize, so let's wait for the sequel, Megalopolis 2.
Well, the problem is nobody believes him because only he, Julia, and the baby can see it happen.
Which is probably why we know Julia is his soulmate, because she can see it happen and doesn't stop in time like everybody else does.
Yeah.
Well, the attitude toward women is kind of interesting in that the women that Coppola approves of are the ones that submit to their husband and, have the children and take care of the house. And the one he disapproves of are the lesbian daughters and the Aubrey Plaza who wants power. So it's a bit, for me, chauvinistic approach to women. It's very Padechayevsky in how he sees women's roles.
Do you want to do Lamb scores, or shall we just skip that?
I've got one if anybody else got them.
I think it would be interesting to see where we would rate this on a traditional scale.
All right, well let's do it. Let's do a quick round of Lamb scores. And James, since you think it would be interesting, you're going to set us up. What would you say out of 5 lambs?
I'd say 1.5.
And Aaron, I think you're going to be going a little bit higher than 1.5.
I mean, I wrote a review. It was an 8 out of 10, so it's a 4 out of 5.
Howard, you're going to be down there with James somewhere, I assume.
Yeah, I guess I'll give it a 1.5 instead of a 1.
Thank you, Howard.
That's a win. That's a win for this podcast.
And Daniel, how about you?
2.5.
And
2.5 with the asterisk saying that there really is an audience for this film. It's just not a very large one.
I kept thinking when we were talking, the question I was going to ask earlier, since we're out here in the weeds, is that, whether you're going to recommend it to somebody to see it. I would say, well, would you rather watch Casablanca or Last Year at Marienbad?
Yeah, I'm going to be seeing Casablanca, thank you.
Okay.
It would be hard
Yeah,
for me, but maybe Last Year only because I've seen Casablanca so many times and only Last Year a couple of times.
I mean, there's worth in both.
Right, exactly.
It's just different tastes.
Exactly.
Yes, and when I said I was straddling the fence, here I am straddling the fence. I'm gonna give it a 3.5. If I had done the first hour, I'd have probably been with Howard and James going, this is just awful. But I was more intrigued by it as we went along. I felt better about it. We have the question about whether or not recommending it to somebody is the same thing as saying don't see it. I see a difference there, but I don't think it's important enough to worry about. I'm going to go with 3.5, like I said.
Does anyone agree with Richard as far as the different halves of the movie? As far like Howard,
and
you
by the way,
like this movie? Did you like this movie going in? Like, or did you fall off midway through?
It grew on me. It did grow on me after a while. But I don't know if there was like a sharp divide, at which point it became enjoyable.
For me, it was basically, there was no point at which I kind of went, okay, this is a success as opposed to not being a success. I did acknowledge points where I went, oh, well, he still got it. Like, when Adam Driver's, when Caesar gets shot by the kid, I mean, you see the gun and he gets shot. I literally jumped out of my seat. And I thought,
same here.
Wow. Even telegraphing, knowing what it was, I still got that visceral reaction. And I thought, wow, a visceral reaction from a movie. That takes some talent.
Yeah, and the dividing point that I had was mostly where the story became more coherent. It was the section where Adam Driver gets arrested. He's on the floor of his cell, and suddenly he begins to revive. And then everything that came after that, I started to be able to figure out what the hell was going on earlier as a result of how much more coherent it was after that. So maybe I'm just retconning that first half and giving myself a justification for liking the movie better, but I'm willing to do that. I just don't know that everybody else in the world would be willing to do that.
Yeah. For me, I would be really sorry if this movie never existed, because I was really looking forward to seeing what he would do with it. I'm really glad it exists, because that question mark is completely out of my thoughts now. But I'm also left thinking, how much of this is anticipation and the shock of what isn't there that might have been? This may have been just one of those things where there was too much anticipation for me because I knew about it. And the potential wasn't reached.
Well, on that note, we're going to finish up our discussion of Megalopolis. We're going to hear from a fellow Lamb Podcasting Network show, and then we'll be back for our exit question of the week.
Mark!
Heather!
We need to tell people why they should listen to our show, Word of Hellmouth, in 45 seconds.
All right. For one, you and I are hardcore fans of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We know what we're talking about.
Anything else?
We are fun to listen to, and our off-topic conversations are legend.
Any other reason Scoobs out there should check us out, Mark?
Simply put, Heather, you and I are 5 by 5.
Oh, yeah!
Where can people find us, Heather?
You can find Word of Hellmouth anywhere you get your podcasts. Our home website at rabbitholepodcast.com, or just hanging out at the Bronze.
And David Boreanaz, if you're listening, hit me up.
Me too. I don't care.
Well, that discussion of Megalopolis was vivid and interesting and full of contradictory opinions. It's all over the place. Let's see if we can be all over the place here at the end when we're dealing with our exit question. I think this is probably going to be Francis Coppola's last film, although, you know what? Who knows? People sometimes find the energy and the money to do something else.
He has 2 more he wants to make.
What did he get enough money from selling the winery to make 2 more films?
He's not poor.
I mean,
Which is, he has 2 other wineries.
By the way,
only 1 of 3.
By the way, I have no objection to people spending their money to do something that they think is a passion project, and they want it. Good on them. So completely separate from the quality of the movie or whether you recommend it. I appreciate somebody who says, you know what, I don't need to have all of this at the end of my life. I would rather have this at the end of my life. And whether or not this is something that you want to have, obviously Coppola wanted to have something. So we are talking about Coppola, and I thought maybe this would be a good time to do a little bit of a retrospective on some things. Not necessarily ranking Coppola films, but sequences from a Coppola film. Is there a scene, a montage, a monologue, something that you say, this is my favorite moment or favorite few moments from a Coppola film? James, I'd like to start with you. Have you got something that you could look at and say, yeah, this is why I like at least this Coppola film, if not all Coppola films?
Yeah, what I really like about Coppola is when he starts his movie with the grand overture and the thesis statement, whether it's Bonacera talking to the Godfather at the beginning of The Godfather or something else. But my favorite sequence of his is still the beginning of Apocalypse Now, and the just overt nihilism of Martin Sheen looking up at the fan in his apartment, and while visions of napalm are going through his head, and The Doors' The End is playing. That to me is just an amazing way to enter into not only the movie but also the character. And I remember seeing it in a theater that Walter Murch, who was the lead sound designer and one of the editors, had set up the speakers in Seattle. And having the helicopters fly right through your head was one of the most amazing things that I'd experienced in movies up to that time. And because I had ambitions to be a sound designer, that was one of the things that just blew me away. It's still my favorite sequence in a Francis Ford Coppola movie.
Daniel, have you got something to match the nihilism of that opening of Apocalypse Now?
I don't know if I'd say nihilism. This is a very, very emotional question for me to answer. One of my mother's, three of my mother's favorite movies of all time were the Godfather movies. My mom and I had a tradition where we would watch at least the first 2 parts just about every November. And the scene in The Godfather Part 2 where Al Neary murders Fredo.
Yeah.
That to me, I think, is one of that to me it just inspires emotion in me. And it really is. I can't necessarily tell you exactly what it is about it, but the way it's shot, John Cazale saying the Hail Mary,
Yeah.
going into it. It's just such an emotional scene. It really chokes me up every time I see it.
And he cuts away just at the part of the Hail Mary. He cuts away to Michael just at the part where he says, "Now and at the hour of our death."
And the expression on Al Pacino's face is just, it's so amazing.
Aaron, have you got a moment that you can think of?
I'm also in the Godfather 2 camp. I mean, there's a long list you can make of Coppola's those four films specifically, and like on a given the week, I would say Conversation is my favorite Coppola film, but Godfather 2, I mean, does have one of my favorite just scenes in movies. I mean, that's like 7 of my favorite scenes in movies of all time. But it's the end. It's what I'm leading up to, but it's the whole build up to this moment where you have this extended flashback where you watch Caan and Duvall and Pacino all talking about what's happening, and you see this is ideal version of Michael, where he's just announced that he's going to go to war, and Caan can't take it. He knows his dad's going to be mad and all this stuff, and they're all against him, and Michael's, his convictions are there. He's like, no, this is what I'm choosing to do. I'm fighting for my country. You see this scene play out, then you get the brief glimpse of the happier times with young Vito and the baby on the train, and you're hearing the music and everything, and then it goes to what my thing is. It's this one of my favorite endings in any movie. It's this quiet shot of just Michael all alone. He's killed his brother. Kay and the family are gone. He's just on a bench, just sitting there in his thoughts, knowing that he's tried to legitimize the business, but at what cost? He's had to do everything evil. He's succumbed to all the darkness possible for the sake of something that's inherently trying to be good, but he's had to do everything in the worst way. He's worse than his father ever was, and he's just all there by himself alone. Cut to black. It rules. Yeah. I love it so much.
Howard, how about you?
Well, for me, I think one of the most shocking scenes from a Coppola film is in The Conversation. It's sort of two films. The first scene is when he is recording the conversation of Harrison Ford and Cindy Williams. And what he hears is,
not Harrison
he'd kill
Ford.
us if he had the chance.
Frederick Forrest.
Then at the end, he listens again and realizes he got it wrong.
Yeah.
And what they actually said was, he'd kill us if he had the chance. And you realize that everything you thought was going on was not what was going on. And also the fact that it's not really objective necessarily in these things.
It's subjective. When I saw that, I thought that was a cheat. But then I realized, no, he's hearing what he thought he was hearing. And what he was really hearing was the substance of what they said and not the intent. And I thought, oh, God, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go conventional. The Godfather movies are just fantastic, and everybody has mentioned several of the things that I would say are truly classic sequences. When I talk about filmmaking, though, that the baptism sequence, where basically all the family's enemies are taken care of, well, Michael is engaging in the most hypocritical kind of behavior as he's committing murder around the country, and he's consecrating the nephew of one of the people that he's murdering. It's just like that whole sequence is put together so beautifully. The music builds together so well, and just like that moment at the end of Godfather 2, where you kind of freeze on the face of Michael, and you see, how empty he is. We see how cold and calculating he is at the end of that sequence, and that tells us everything that's going to be coming. Nothing that follows is a surprise. We know it's going to be expected because he's got a block of ice as his heart. Well, I appreciate you guys showing up for the discussion. I appreciate you seeing the movie. I'm glad that we talked about it. I'm like James. I'm glad the movie exists, and I want to give everybody a chance here to share with our audience what it is that they would like them to know from you. So what have you got to see? What have you got to hear? What do you want people to know about? A chance to plug whatever you like.
One last thing.
Sure.
What we were just talking about are things that moved us throughout his career. And there's nothing in Megalopolis that really moves you other than me being catapulted out of my chair at the one point. And that's kind of why I think this is tentatively a failure. Maybe if I'm emotionally disengaged from it, I can look at it more objectively, but not at this point.
I think those moving walkways will move you. Those are really moving.
Dream projects, like you said, are always dangerous, but I will be first in line if David Lynch ever makes Ronnie Rocket.
There you go. Me too.
All right. Howard, what have you got to promote this week? What can you tell us that we should be looking for?
Well, it looks like tomorrow pop-up art is back.
Yay!
Upload the new episode. It's with Bubba Wheat, where we discuss Total Recall and General de la Rivera. Both films ask the question, who are we? Are we who we are? Are we who we think we are? Or are we who other people think we are? And then later today, I'm recording the Halloween episode with Lisa Leahy. Well, we will be talking 10 Cloverfield Lane, along with William Wyler's The Collector. Both films are about people who abduct women and keep them prisoner. Okay.
Daniel, do you have something that you would like people to look at or hear?
I am my Doctor Who podcast from Intertime is currently on hiatus until presumably December when the 2024 Christmas special airs. But I do get around on the Rabbit Hole Podcast Network. RabbitHolePodcast.com. Last night, our fearless leader Jason Soto recorded a riff which I was part of. We riffed a movie called a late 70s kung fu movie called Crippled Master. So that should be the footage of that should be uploaded somewhere at some point in time.
Well,
that's what I'm up to.
If I can find the link, I'll make sure to put it in the notes. Otherwise, everybody who's listening, go find it. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. James, I know you never have anything that you want to promote, but do so anyway.
Blogging by Cinemalite. It's actually got content now. So I kind of took a creative vacation for a while. Now things are back, semi-scheduled. There's enough impetus for me and interest for me to keep putting things up. So it's back up.
Good deal. Aaron, I know that you're a busy guy and have seen a bunch of things that are coming up soon, so I'm sure you've got something that you want us to turn our eyes or ears to.
Well, sure. I'm the editor-in-chief at WeLiveEntertainment.com. You can find all my movie reviews there, including my thoughts on Megalopolis and why it at least slightly moved me. I'm the co-host of Out Now with Aaron and Abe, a podcast where we talk about weekly movie releases and a lot of other things. It's October soon, and we'll have a lot of bonus horror-themed episodes coming, which we're always a big fan of doing. And I'm on all the socials and stuff at Aaron's PS4.
Very nice. Very nice. And on my site, as usual, there's just the material that I've seen in theaters. I did catch up with the Christopher Reeve documentary, Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, and I thought that was well worth your time and energy if you could find it. I'm sure it'll be on Netflix eventually, so when it shows up there, you might come back to my site and check and see what my thoughts on it were. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us this week, and I appreciate all of the thoughts on Megalopolis, and hopefully people will forget the bad puns that folks have come up with and remember something good about the movie. Stop calling it Megaflopolis. That's just annoying.
Or
amen to that.
The money doesn't matter. The question is the art, and we have differences of opinion on art. That's perfectly fine.
I was going to say, it's like I said at the top of the podcast. If we're going to spend $130 million on a movie, slight difference there. Let's do these personal passion projects, even if we ended up hating them. Because I can't sit through another friggin' Halloween movie.
Thank you. And with that, we'll close. Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.
Ha 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 ha